Okay, my fellow chaos navigators, today's episode is one for the parents who are done Googling why does my child meltdown after school at 1 a.m. while eating stale goldfish crackers in the dark. Because today we are joined by someone who gets it, like really deeply in her bones gets it. Lisa Richer isn't just a neurodiversity consultant. She's the unapologetic, brilliant powerhouse mama behind Journey to Bloom, a platform that helps parents, educators, and entire systems shift the way we see and support our kiddos. She's a mom to two incredible neurodivergent kiddos, one autistic, one ADHD, and she's neurodivergent herself, which means she isn't giving you ivory tower theory, she's giving you lived experience. Late night breakdowns, school meeting drama, and hard-fought wins. With 15 plus years of personal and professional experience, Lisa's helped families go from overwhelmed and invisible to empowered and informed. She's the creator of the Ripe Ideas framework, which we are definitely going to get into, a speaker, an advocate, and a relentless truth teller, and what our kids actually need to thrive, not just survive. If you've ever felt like you're fighting a battle no one else sees, trust me, Lisa sees you. And she came armed with strategy, science, and a whole lot of mom wit. So refill your coffee or reheat it for the third time, and let's welcome the one and only Lisa Richer. Lisa, welcome to Chaos and Caffeine.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. So I have to ask, what is in your cup? I seen you drinking it there.
Yeah, it's today it's Dunkin'. It's coffee,
Mm.
black coffee.
I'm an iced coffee even in the winter kind of girl. I'm new to
Oh goodness.
coffee. Yeah.
I'd say 18 years ago, my coffee journey really started when I had my first
Mm.
son.
Yeah,
And it hasn't gone away since. It got even bigger with my second child.
I
So
get
yes,
that.
yes. Although having ADHD, I learned that caffeine actually calms me. It doesn't. And
Yes.
my therapist said, well, that's because you have ADHD. So it actually has the adverse effect. I was like, oh, no wonder it never kept me up for college exams. I learned a long time after.
I diagnose people all the time that I hear say, I can drink 4 cups of coffee and go to sleep. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I see you.
Yeah, that's me.
So I am a sucker for a good origin story. Tell me how you started your career, if you do not mind.
Oh my goodness. So my current career, because it's been many careers in the making. Um, so how I started this. Um, Unintentionally 18 years ago is when this really started to evolve. My oldest was at around 4, he was diagnosed autistic. And then my younger one was diagnosed ADHD around 8.5. And so they both have other neurotypes as well, but those are their two core diagnoses. And so the journey to doing the work I do really started back then. I was advocating for my oldest son, trying to figure it out. We had a lot of interventions in Maryland early on. Then we moved to California, where I said that my dream team became a reality of behavioral psychologists and OT, speech and language, social skills, like behavioralists, all these different components came together with my oldest, and he finally got diagnosed. And so I've been doing advocacy work for 18 years. I just so it evolved from that, and um, I eventually, and when my oldest, who's now a senior in high school, was in, I guess, fourth grade, his principal was retiring, and he said he was giving my kids parting gifts, if you will. They were the teachers that they really needed at the time to be able to thrive. My younger one had more recently been diagnosed with his ADHD and anxiety. and then the older one, the principal, my older son, just really hit it off. They both had the same jacket, and so they really connected on some of those commonalities. And he would do lunch bunches with him. My son would want to go to the principal's office to have lunch. Who wants to go to the principal's office? But this principal was awesome. And so when he left, he said, "You have got to do this as a living." And I said, "I don't know. I don't know." And he said, "We need more people like you. We need more parents that turn advocates, that are going to wrap their arms around and work with the school instead of against the school." And so I shared with him my blog that I had been journaling my oldest son's journey. And I've gone back and forth, like gets in the way. And I have pockets of it and not pockets of lots of gaps. But this principal, I call him David now, but he was like, you just have to do this, please. And then once he saw my blog, he's like, "You really need to do this even more." And so I did end up going and getting my advocacy certifications through COPA, which is the Council of Parent Attorney Advocates. I have 2 certifications through them. And what I had said to him was, "I don't feel like I can do this as a business because I don't have enough knowledge." And he laughed. And that all came from my years in corporate, where I don't have letters behind my name. I didn't have a master's degree. I didn't have a PhD. When I got asked to take over an HR department, they wanted me to get my senior HR certification so that I could have letters behind my name, because everyone had either a CPA, had something.
Yeah.
But what I've learned over time is those letters don't mean anything without the lived experience and the implementation and execution of those. So I said to the principal, "I need to get this, I need to get more." And he said, "Well, you need to get it for your comfort level, but not because I've seen the work you do." And I always say, like, in collaboration with the school, I'm there because the parents hire me, but I'm really there for the child. And then what that's evolved into is I started out as Bloom Special Education Advocacy. So I was just doing what I just described to you. But because of my background in sales leadership, my background in learning and development, and my background as a coach and as a gymnast for 13 plus years, and then I coached gymnastics, I thought, well, why am I getting pigeonholed anymore into this? So over the years, I was made to feel less than. I would go into corporate. They would say, "I don't get you. I don't understand. I thought you were smarter than that. Why can't you put together a deck slide the way that we need it, with the agenda and in the middle and then the end?" Because I put it together from the middle, and then I back into the table of contents and how it all comes together. And I realized, well, wait a minute. I have grown up undiagnosed neurodivergent. Well, not fully. Anxiety was diagnosed with in my early 20s, but then the ADHD, I was in my early 50s. And so I thought, like, what am I waiting for? Why am I not doing all of this? So now my business has 3 parts. It has the parent component. It has professionals that are looking to do career transformation, because I spent years in doing life coaching, but I don't call myself a coach, more like advising and mentorship. And then I spent years in the staffing world. So I'm like, why don't I take all of these things and the training and development background, and so now I work also with professionals and then organizations, and the organizations, I help them understand what is neurodiversity, and then how do you lead and engage across neurotypes, how do you take your authentic self and that art of relationship building. So that is how all of it, if you think about the origin story, there's these pieces that now have created what I call Journey to Bloom. I rebranded in 2020 in the middle of COVID to Journey to Bloom. And I rebranded myself as a neurodiversity consultant. And that's how I support people. And that's how it all came together.
Thank you for sharing that. That was so lovely. You hit one of my anxious spots right now. My son is in 4th grade. He has an amazing principal, and my number one fear is that she is going to retire before his 5th grade year.
Yes.
And when I try to get some reassurance, she's not willing to give it. So I don't know if she'll be around or not, but I That resonates with me deeply right now.
Well, I would tell you that um, talk with her because she can't reassure you. If you have a good relationship with her now, what I would encourage you to do is what I did when my oldest, well, they were both my kids were in elementary at the time, but specifically my oldest and David had a really solid relationship, was what can we do to prepare my Joseph is my oldest name, my younger one, Xander. What can we prepare with now? So no matter what happens next year, whether you're there or not, he knows who his safe people are. He knows what to do. He knows how to navigate things. And that's what I would encourage you to do is have that conversation because oftentimes our peace of mind is more what triggers our children's lack of peace of mind. And so if we can be prepared with no matter what, things are going to be good. He's been with the school, he's going into fifth grade. So he's kind of like the big kid on campus, right? Going next year. But what can that principal do to help you as mom feel reassured that it's going to be okay? And that's a lot of kind of the work that I do with a lot of my parents. They come to me thinking they need the help for their kid, and then they really need the confidence and courage and the clarity for themselves in order to make things happen too. And
Yeah.
so, like, you just got a glimpse into kind of some of the conversation that I have with parents often, but it really ends up being like we trigger our own kids' anxieties. And my youngest son and I have this running joke that I call him Baby Bear, and he calls me Mama Bear, um, because my therapist said, "You guys are so similar, and so like you're literally poking each other, like it's like
Mm.
you poke the bear." And so like it turned into in the last year and a half this whole thing of if we're triggering each other, I say, "Okay, Baby Bear, let's do this," and I'll go. It'll kind of shift us out of that brain of anxiety and both of us into a more like kind of calm state. And
Mm.
it's amazing how much my actions and reactions trigger, especially him, because my older one doesn't have the anxiety. He did at one point, but it was more triggered by his autistic struggle. My younger one actually is diagnosed with anxiety as one of his things, and his anxiety was triggering ADHD and absence seizures. And so we had to really figure out like chicken or the egg and what's first. And one of those first was realizing that I was also a trigger for him.
Mm. I get that so much. And through my many years of trying to learn how to parent a kid with ADHD, I've heard repeatedly in very loving, reassuring tones that I could be exacerbating the problems. Even if it's my biggest thing is my tone. I need to
Mm-hmm.
work on that so much. I'm still working on that. Even I will be a mom for 10 years next month. And it's like, whew. So I definitely want to dive into your three pillars, but I cannot skip over the fact that you have a very unique perspective into something I run across a lot. And I know that it would be different for each family, but could you tell me any overlapping symptoms that you see from ADHD and autism that parents can look
Mm-hmm.
out for?
Absolutely. So before I go there, let me say I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, doctor. So I do not diagnose. And I'm also a big believer that diagnoses inform how we support each other and how people are supported, but they do not define. So it's really informational. And so, with the things that I would say, we think about these overlaps. Um, One thing that's a lot more nuanced is the masking and the camouflaging. And so, I often find there's such a big movement with autism and the voices of autistic individuals, which is very dear to my heart. I'm the chair of a board that is focused on autistic adults, um, and also my oldest, my firstborn. And so it's the camouflaging and masking of like what is and isn't working, and the implosions. So when you think about, like, they talk often about autistic meltdowns and how it's different than a temper tantrum. Well, I can tell you that while things show up very differently on each side, it is very apparent to me that both of my children have meltdowns, not temper tantrums, for very different reasons. And so with the autistic, my oldest son, it was the sensory overload and the too much visual input or auditory input. And so he definitely has sensory processing disorder. My younger son, who is ADHD and anxiety, when he doesn't understand something and or you think you can make a joke while he's trying to be calm, and he's a super silly kid, but when he's in that dysregulated state or that hyperfixated state, he will have a meltdown because you're not listening to him. And so similar to autistic, when someone's like in a black and white, I need to go, 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 linear focus, and then they have the overload and they might dysregulate and have a meltdown. So they're being triggered by different things, but they still result in meltdowns. And so that's an overlap. One thing that I learned when my oldest got diagnosed, it seems to be much more apparent now because you see a lot of ADHD. I was told when my oldest, again, I didn't come up with this. The psychiatrist who diagnosed, well, the psychiatrist boss who diagnosed my oldest said, you will find that, and this is back when it was ADD and ADHD and everything's under the ADHD umbrella. But what he told me was, you will find that a child who is diagnosed autistic will always have a form of ADD or ADHD. But a child who's diagnosed ADHD does not always have autism. And so I find it fascinating that now there's the ADHD, and I feel like, well, everyone that's diagnosed autistic is ADHD, really, if you think about what that doctor told me. However, is that true? I don't know. I'm just saying, because of those intersections of some of it, it seems relevant to me that it is true. So I would say those are the two biggest pieces of the overlaps, is that you will see meltdowns for different reasons. You may also see the fixation of the hyper fixated, but for different reasons, because my oldest was asking one day, well, how come Xander, my youngest, can literally lock into a game? Lock in is like that term, right? That the kids learning the lingo of the teenagers. But he can lock in and not get off his computer for 2 hours. But then he comes downstairs and he is like bouncing off the walls and impulsive and hyperactive. And my oldest says, like, how is that possible? So that's another thing that could be one or the other, could be an overlap. An autistic child that's really interested in something, they're going to fixate and focus on it. Well, a child that has ADHD can also fixate and focus for different reasons, but also still because they're interested in it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. We have an amazing pediatrician. If he's listening, we love you a lot. But he kind of has this thing where he's like, we all have a little bit of ADHD. We all have a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't think that's true. But I do know, only statistically, that you are right in saying that statistically many more autistic children have ADHD traits than the reverse way. I think it drops drastically the other way. But in trying to tell him that I think my kid has a little bit of both, he was like, He's nonchalant about everything, which drives me crazy sometimes, but
Yeah, understood. And I would say that there are definitely, I'll use myself as an example. I was part of a study that a psychologist in the UK has been working on. I won't say their name because it's all still very confidential, but they were going through like helping to diagnose ADHD in women, diagnose autism, diagnose HSP, because it's really not a diagnosis, but just a highly sensitive person, the PDA, all these different things. And I took the assessment several different times because they kept on editing and updating, and we would do it. And every time I felt like 5 points off, also being autistic. And my oldest once in a while would say, I wonder if you're also autistic, Mom. And I said, well, I always fall 5 points off of it. and it was pretty consistent. And so I was like, well, technically it's saying I'm not. But when I look at all those overlaps, I definitely have traits and things, yet I believe that they're exacerbated because of the ADHD. I will say, given what your pediatrician said, I think everybody has anxious moments,
Mm.
but everyone doesn't have a little bit of anxiety. Like
Yeah.
everyone's not a little bit anxiety, and ADHD, you can get excited about things, but it's like the moments in time and how consistent it is and all of that, that's really it makes a difference.
Mm.
However, there's always going to be people that feel like we all have a little bit of everything. Um, but I would have to just say that's your opinion, and I believe otherwise.
Yeah. So, selfishly, may we start with the parent pillar of your business because I want to bask in all the glory myself.
Absolutely. So I could go in so many different directions. Is there something specific about the parent pillar that you would like me to talk through?
So, do you work in school settings alone or do you cross all settings?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So I don't within with the work that I do as a neurodiversity consultant, or some people will call it an advocate or educational consultant, whatever they want to call it. The role that I play there mostly is for the parents. So there's three parts to that. And if someone went to my website, they would see clarity, confidence, and courage. And when I first set up the business, I thought, oh, people are going to choose one of three. Well, typically they end up intertwining with all three because I've learned over the years that it all intersects. But clarity is really about like a journey map is how I had initially envisioned it. So helping parents figure out what are all of the pieces. I talked about being in California and having my dream team. Had it not been for a happenstance, I guess is what it's called, right? At a little gym in California where my oldest, who has sensory processing disorder as part of his autism diagnosis, but I didn't know it yet. And he was literally melting down constantly. Well, if anybody's been in a little gym or my gym, the things on the walls, the colors, the shapes, the music, the tambourine, like all of it. And I was the director of a little gym for a while. So I know exactly what that's all about. And that's why I took him thinking he can get a lot of his energy out. But it imploded him. And this mom came up to me and said, I have a behavioral psychologist you need to meet. She's kind of like the super nanny. Now, I'm not loving the
Wow.
Superman nanny these days because she doesn't believe in these diagnoses. She thinks she can like work it out. I can tell you, I tried the super nanny stuff on my kids. Doesn't work when you have a
Yeah.
child that's neurodivergent. So I'm gonna just that's my experience. Um, but knowing who to talk to. And that behavioral psychologist became my conduit, if you will, to the preschool he ended up transitioning to an OT,
Mm.
to a behavioralist, to her doing social skills classes. So connecting those dots, and instead of being so overwhelmed by the information, the options out there, even though there's some sites that say they have everything, there's always something you don't know. But then you don't know what you don't know. So who do I ask these questions of? What questions have I not asked? How does that work? And so some people will hire me just to navigate that process for them
Mm.
and do that. And then there's my confidence offering, which is the confidant and the support, where I was mentioning earlier. A lot of times parents come to me because they think they need help with the IEP or the 504 process or getting diagnosed, but really they need personalized guidance themselves and support on how to move through the journey of a neurodiverse learner, no matter what the topic is.
Yeah.
And then, so oftentimes it's one-on-one conversations with them and just helping them unpack and realize I come to this without judgment, without shame. I've been there, I've lived it. I've been living it for 18 years. Really, I've been living it for 53 because I'm also neurodivergent, just didn't really know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And then the courage side of it is really the being a thought partner and helping to guide and support parents or caregivers while they are preparing for and participating in discussions with the schools and sometimes even the specialists.
Mm.
So I have been in conversations with OTs, with speech and language pathologists, with psychologists. I do consults with them if the parent wants me involved in those conversations. Sometimes I'm in conversations with lawyers because the parent uses me and a lawyer because we do different things. And so under the parent part, that those are the three areas upon which I support and do the work.
Thank you for breaking that down. I can see how, as a neurodivergent parent, you need support in all of those realms.
And it's all through lived experience that I recognize this. And I honestly, when I rebranded to do this along with the other pillars, I spent a lot of time working with a person who I found out as I was talking with her has a neurodivergent child, and she was trying to get some free support, and that person never even showed up for the IEP meeting. And she says, I wish I had someone like you to help me through the process. I would have paid for it had I known people like you were out there.
Mhm.
Because, I when I think about it, I think about we talk about what you know, what you don't know, and then what you don't know, you don't know. And there's no matter how long I do this role, there's always something I don't know, especially as I go up into the high school arenas and go into the transition services. My oldest is going off to college, and I had to call his department at his private school to say, okay, I'm not even sure what we do. Then I had to call the college admissions office and their accommodations department to say, how do I help my son navigate this process? Because I don't know what happens post high school because I do mostly, I would say birth through 21 if they're still in the school system. But my sweet spot starts around 3. And then initially it was only through 5th grade, but now it's expanded through high school because I find, I think about it, kids grow up to be adults, adults grow up to be, and that's why I also expanded into those other pillars. But the earlier the intervention, the more possibility, because those diagnoses, remember, inform, don't define, how we support and help one another, help that child grow.
Mm, that is good. So, flipping that, how is it that you help? Do you help children individually, or is it more of a family concept?
So I don't typically work with kids one on one, but it would be a family. Um, the kids that are in, like, let's say infants and toddlers or pre-K, kind of like the birth through 5, and then through 5th grade, the majority of the time I'm working with the family. So whether it's just the mom or the mom and dad or the grandparents, um, and then they might talk to the kids. And then come 5th grade, a lot of times I'll ask for the kids' opinion on something directly. So sometimes they'll come to a meeting with me, sometimes they'll come on the phone or on a video so I can get to know them. Because I always say, let me be your voice. How would you describe what's happening if you could be in the room, but you don't want to be in the room? How would you describe it? Going into middle school, I really try to engage the children more, and I try to encourage them to come into the meetings because their voice is very important. I did the same with my own children. Um, and then if they're not willing to come in, I do kind of like a pseudo interview with them, or just kind of, like a not an interview, but let's have a conversation. How do you want me to share? What do you want me to share on your behalf? And um, and then into high school, I really encourage them to show up, whether they're on camera or not. Give us the notes. We can state them. You say yes or no. Did we get that right? And so it starts out oftentimes with parents and caregivers or guardians, and then it evolves into including the child or children, depending on how many kids they have and that are neurodivergent and need my support.
So, candidly, at our last 504 meeting, the principal asked me if I wanted to include my son, and I said no, only because I didn't think he would understand what we were talking about. But the principal never told the school counselor who conducts the meeting. So after we had the parent counselor part of the meeting, she invited him in, and I was blown away by how much he could articulate what he needed and advocate for himself. And I was like, maybe I am the one who has been holding him back in some areas. I
So
was so proud.
absolutely. So I didn't mean to interject. I was just going to say, give yourself some grace.
Mm,
Don't judge yourself for that. I will say that oftentimes fourth grade is too early to bring a child in. Um, I brought my own son in at fifth grade, and he convinced us that he no longer needed extended time on tests because
mm,
that was what he didn't want it. He wanted to go into middle school not feeling or looking any different.
yeah.
Um, and at that point in time, I hadn't had my certifications yet, so I didn't realize that they could do extended time just for certain classes, even in middle school,
Mm,
whereas in elementary it was easier. But the guidance counselor didn't know what she didn't know, and she's like, "Oh, it has to be one or nothing, all or nothing." Come to find out that wasn't the case. But he had said, "I don't need it, I don't want it," so we took that accommodation off, but then it went back on pretty quickly into sixth grade because the teachers were like, "We are actually already giving you that extended time." So he has a processing delay as part of his autistic diagnosis as well. And so um, we ended up putting it back on. So I will say kudos, you're doing a lot right. If your son was able to articulate it, you weren't holding him back. You set
mm,
him up to be able to advocate for himself. So let's flip the script here, Danielle. And I will say to you, you're doing a lot right for him to be comfortable and confident enough to share what he needed and
mm,
what he needed to be support and to be able to share that. Because ultimately, our role as parents is to really help our kids learn how to advocate. And the earlier, the better. You were talking about your tone earlier. A lot of times it's not what we say, it's how we say it
mhm.
and how we show it. And so you inadvertently, right, unintentionally having him be in there, he gets to grow confidence. He gets to be part of it. And it makes me even less concerned about how he's going to be in fifth grade, whether or not that principal's there, because he now knows he has a voice on the team that is really there for him.
Mm. Thank you so much for that reframe. I desperately needed it because I have been believing that I am keeping my baby small. He actually told me, well, I mean, of course, I told him after the meeting. I literally told him, I thought that you weren't ready to be in there, but you really, really proved me wrong. But he was able to say, kind of like your son, with the time, they were offering a single page, a question and passage per page, one per page. And he was like, yes, I think that would be really helpful with a larger font and for focus. And I was like, oh, who is this little baby Yoda that I get the opportunity to raise?
Yes, yes, yes. There is no try, only do, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So yeah, so it's and you were honest with him
Mm,
also in saying you weren't sure, but he proved you wrong. And that is even more of now how do you build upon that?
yeah.
How do you and I will be the first to say my youngest, my oldest calls me out on this now too. He says, "Mom, you enable me to not have to do stuff." He's going off to college, right? And he's like, "Well, when you weren't home." And I said, "Well, why can't you just do it while I am home?" And he
Yeah.
said, "Well, because you just go ahead and do it for me." Well, I also realized that I did the same with my husband for years.
Mm,
He listens to this. I um I do I have enabled him to do things for so many years.
mm,
And it was it's just funny that when I went into burnout during the beginning of COVID, like probably 6 months into COVID, and they had to do things on their own. And there's a lot that I do for myself now. But as parents, especially as moms of neurodivergent children, you feel like you just need to be there. So what you were saying, like being that mama bear and not a helicopter parent, but more of the I need to keep you safe. And my oldest, he really couldn't do a lot by himself for many years. And now, like, he talks about how he's like, it's great. Like, wow, dad and I talk a lot more and we get along. And it was more about the fact that my husband didn't know how to connect with him.
mm,
And I was living in it. And we had a nanny who also, when we were in California, who was there with the behavioralist. My husband was working. He was either driving. an hour. Well, in California, everything's an hour down, down to work and then back, or he was traveling across the country, back east before we moved back here. And so, he didn't know what he didn't know because he would get bits and pieces of stuff. And so he also didn't see some of the things that were happening more consistently. And so I had to be there to protect or support in some cases. And that's a hard habit to break. And then with my younger son, similar things, hard to connect because it's like, am I the one that's at fault? Or, whatever those self-judgment things that we all think about. And I find that males, not judging, but I have friends who have kids, one that was diagnosed autistic around the same time as my oldest, and he went into a really deep depression for a couple of years. And his wife was like, he didn't even talk to me. And I was like, and he came out of it and said, I just didn't know what to do. I felt like I failed my child. And mama bears say that, and we go, okay, we're going to figure this out. Papa bears go into their cave, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to unravel that. And my youngest, who just got bar mitzvah last year, um, he was saying, there was a part of his speech, and he's like, yeah, my dad's the best person I know. And I was like heartbroken.
Mm.
Not that he said that about dad, but I'm like, I have done so much for you for so many years. And wow, and you still think dad's the best person you know. But what the wake up call was for me, and I think this is just an important message for parents, um, is that being there and supporting your kids all the time isn't always what they need.
Mm.
And I learned that the hard way. And what my youngest said to me was, Mom, Dad really pushes me to do things that I know, or sometimes I didn't even know I could do or I was capable of. Whereas you'll let me do it at start, but then you'll end up doing it for me or helping me, and that's not helping me grow. And I thought, okay, as heart wrenching as it was to hear him have that as part of, and at that point, we were really butting heads with that mama bear, baby bear thing that I was telling you about earlier. And
Yeah.
we're very similar with our ADHD and anxieties. And he has the impulsive piece, which I don't have. But it just made for some really tough times for he and I. And we're in a really good place now, but we would fight all the time. And I learned from my therapist is because he and I were so similar, whereas my husband and him are pretty opposites in some ways, but in sarcasm and silliness, they're the same person, so we each have our strengths, and the more we can work with one another, whether we're together as a family unit or we're co-parenting, just being able to feed off of one another in the best ways possible, but then also let our children fail in a safe space. Let them fall down. I'm so good at talking to my parents about that, and even my professionals that I work with, like, give yourself space to make those mistakes because that's how you grow from them. But I was always the last to take my own advice. And
Mm.
so I learned to do it as a professional, but I still wasn't doing it as a parent until he made that speech. And I was like, wow, yeah, I'm really not helping him by doing these things. So it's kind of back to what you and I were talking about before we even got on the podcast today. It's, are we holding them back? And I wouldn't say we're keeping them small, we're keeping them safe. But is
Yeah.
safe really what they need?
Dagger through my heart because my co parent often says I am, maybe enabling isn't the right word, but I'm definitely not letting him flourish and grow on his own. And I see that, but it's like so hard to stop.
Yeah, yeah. But I will tell you, if you do it with love and you do it with openness, if there's nothing more that I've done as a parent, my greatest thing is that uncovering who I was never meant to be so that I could become who I always was at the core, but life, society, parents, people in general, even people I called my friends, like I felt like I had to fit into a square box when I was a circle, and I never felt like me. From after 15, it was just like everything started to unravel and people didn't understand me. But I've learned who I am, and I've become again a better version even of the person that I was so loving back years and years ago. I'm a better version of that. And in part, it's allowed me to really help my kids unapologetically be themselves.
Mm.
And that is the greatest thing that I've done as a parent. And the greatest thing I don't think there's anything that can be beyond that, because my kids will advocate for themselves. They are who they are unapologetically. And you either like them and you lean into them, or you choose not to be friends with them. And while it hurts sometimes, the fact that they are unapologetically themselves makes me so happy, because they're never going to go through some of what I've gone through over that 30-year span of trying to figure out, who am I? Do I fit here? Do I not fit here? Okay, I fit nowhere. Now what? They're actually going through life as themselves. One's just starting high school, one's about to start college. And so back to that co-parenting, or in like in tandem parenting, um, figure out what they need and listen to them, because as my kids get older, they're certainly telling me what they need and don't need, and they will call me out on it. And when we don't react to them calling it out, and instead we lean in with curiosity, then you can grow together. So you and your 9-year-old can be on this path now. And it could start with, I wonder what else it is that you can do that I'm not thinking you can do. Just like that meeting and how well you handled it makes me think, what else? Tell me, what else do you want more rope for? What else do you want more leeway for? And then if I'm not giving it to you, tell me. I
Yeah.
promise you I won't get mad. Let's get through this together, because as he goes into 5th grade and then into middle school, he's going to want to be able to do it. And you're going to want him to be able to advocate for himself. And clearly he's capable of it. So
Yeah.
you can take that and use that as your foundation for him to grow and then for you to grow.
Lisa, that is so good. And I am 100% sure that all the mamas and papas in our audience are like, how can I work with this lady? So,
Oh,
do you
thank
want to
you.
tell people how they can get in touch with you for all of this support?
Absolutely. You can get in touch with me the same place for all the support. Um, there is a parent tab, and there's also the professionals tab, which I know we didn't really get into, but there is the professionals piece of it, and some of it intertwines as well. But you can go to my website, where you can learn more about the clarity, confidence, and courage stuff for the parents, and then for the professionals, it evolves under support, empower, and advise. And oftentimes they intersect with one another. But you can go to Journey to Bloom, Journey, the number 2Bloom.com. If you put in Journey to Bloom, it'll still get to my website. Put in my name, Lisa Richer. I think it should also still get to my website, redirect you. You can also find me on LinkedIn under Lisa Lazar, Lazar, Richer. Lazar is my maiden name. Same thing on Facebook, or you can find me under Journey, the number 2Bloom on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Insta also. I never really embraced Insta. I guess I just don't, with my ADHD brain, we talked about this, right? It's like, I know LinkedIn and I know Facebook, and I know there's a way to connect LinkedIn and Facebook with Insta. Still haven't figured that out. But you can get to me in those ways, as well as Lisa at Journey, the number 2Bloom.com. There's also a contact page on the website, both for the parent and the professionals.
And I'll, of course, link them in the show notes.
Thank you.
I honestly end with a final tipping point, but you've dropped so many truth bombs on me. I'm almost timid to even ask for. It's all been so good.
Thank you.
Man,
Um, if you want to ask me one more thing, I'm happy to, if there's anything else to share.
man, I think there's so much for me in particular that spoke directly to me that I cannot wait to re-listen to, that I probably need to section off and work on individually week by week. I love how you said to build on his accomplishment that he already made. I love that so much. I'm definitely going to work on that.
I think that that is really something we can all learn from, building on the accomplishments. Um, whether you are a parent, whether you're a professional, whether you're an organization, if we don't find those foundational pillars, those blueprints, it's just like building a house. If
Mm,
we build a house that doesn't have the frame that is necessary to grow and thrive, when there's a crack in the foundation, everything implodes.
mm,
I'm a very big proponent
very
of
true.
analogies, but everything will implode. And so like I would say when you're thinking about building on those accomplishments, when I talk about like the professional side of the work, and this can intertwine with the parents too, but I have a framework that's called Ripe Ideas, and I's in it are lowercase. And it's because I believe that when you implement inclusivity, and in this case, we could talk about you including your son in those decisions, in
Mm,
those conversations. We can use it that way. But RIGHT stands for reflect, implement, practice, and evaluate. So if you're going to do one thing, or if somebody takes away one thing from here for you, Danielle, building upon that foundation. So what is that foundational story, right? That's your starting point, your grounding place. And it is just how well your son can advocate for himself when given the chance. So it's kind of like you could have a conversation starter when given the opportunity, and then fill in blank.
mm,
I don't like to use the word why. For me, it's very triggering. And growing up, I would ask questions, and why do you need to know that? Why do you just do as I say, not as I do, right? I grew up in that world.
yeah.
And that doesn't work for me. And it definitely does not work for either one of my children. My oldest still will say, I need to understand why. And my people will answer him, maybe because he's 18 now, more more directly than my younger one who asks the same questions, but then he'll get like pushback, and I just need to understand. And that was me growing up. I needed to understand in order for it to make sense to me. That's
Yeah.
another commonality between my autistic son and my ADHD son, the why behind it. They need to understand the why behind it, but asking the question why up front from the person saying, why do you need to know that? It doesn't fly as much. So when given the opportunity, I would say, what? When given the opportunity, what can we work on? How can we work on that? When will we work on that? So, the what, when, and how, but don't put the why in there
Mm,
can be very helpful. And then you can go back and you can reflect on it, try to implement something again, practice it, see how that works, and then evaluate how did that work for you. And so you're implementing it inclusively with him, and then the co-parenting. You can talk about it. Like, I'm working on these things, and so when your son is, feeding it back to you, you can have those honest conversations.
mm. This is so good. I feel like you should charge me for this hour. I
You're
have
very kind.
learned so much. I cannot wait to listen to the retake. I'm blown away by what I forget in a few weeks, but I don't think I'll be forgetting a lot of this. It's so good.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I will just say, no matter where you are in the country, I can work with you. Like, if somebody wants to get a hold of me, doesn't matter where they are in the country. I even collaborate with people across the world in different continents, and other places. Like, I collaborate with people in Australia, I collaborate with people in England, and in some other areas as well. And so if it makes sense, then we can find the opportunity and the time frame that works. And there's something that someone wants to work with me on, whether it's as a parent or a professional or an organization, I am open to the conversation to see what might make sense. Everybody I work with is either someone that has listened to me be a guest. I joke around that I do the phrase OPP, which there's this song, and that's not where I'm going with this. I leverage other people's platforms. I leverage other people's podcasts. I leverage other people's programming. In collaboration is how I view everything. And
Yeah.
so everything's a referral for me. And the work that I do with people is always because they heard of me or they listened to me or something, because I need to make sure that there's a common ground, talking about that foundation of something where people are going to be willing to be vulnerable and unpack, so that we can bring it back together and move forward for the
Mm,
betterment of whatever it is that you're coming to me for.
yes. I love that so much. Maybe we can get together for a part two on your professionals. I'm sorry, I know I took you directly down the parent path.
Parents are also professionals, so there's certainly that piece of it. No, it's fine. That's why I love the fluidity. You had talked to me about that ahead of time, and because you never know where it's going to go. People can always find the professional and reach out to me for a consult to talk about it. But oftentimes it's those parents or even professionals that grew up undiagnosed and now they realize, oh my gosh, and then they want to work with me too. So that childhood connection is really for me a thread because I also realized how different wasn't deficient or wrong. It's just unique. And I wish I was born sometimes 30 years later because I feel like I was meant to be born in today's world,
Yeah,
not into the world I was born into. But then I wouldn't be doing what I do now if I didn't have all of those years of lived experience.
very true. Man, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. I will be looking for your bill in the mail for
Oh,
my
no.
one on one consultation here.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. You're going to post this out, and I'll get to repost it, and hopefully it'll resonate with people, and that will be plenty
I
of
am
that
sure it will.
reciprocity there. And if you did ever want to talk, professional, we can certainly do that at another point in time. But this one's on the house. It was a pleasure. The time flew by. I looked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's.
I know I can do this all day. I can do this all day, every day. Thank you so much, Lisa. It has been an absolute joy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's just been so much fun. I really appreciate to get to know you. And this is not the last time. We should absolutely stay in touch.
Absolutely. Okay, I know you guys didn't sign up to come to my personal coaching sessions, but here we are. If you're anything like me, you're now sitting in a puddle of equal parts inspiration and holy crap, someone finally put words to what I've been feeling. Lisa did not just drop knowledge today. She dropped truth bombs, strategy, and soul level validation. And that, my friends, is rarer than a meltdown free Monday. Whether you're in the thick of IEP battles, decoding another cryptic teacher email, or just trying to keep your ADHD kiddo from microwaving slime, again, Lisa reminded us that we're not crazy, we're not alone, and we are absolutely not failing. So here's your homework. Go follow Lisa at journeytobloom.com, connect with her work, and please, for the love of executive dysfunction, give yourself some grace today. You are doing hard, holy work. And now you've got one more badass in your corner. Until next time, keep caffeinated, keep fighting for your kids, and remember, chaos is not the enemy. It's where the magic lives. I'll see you guys next week on Chaos and Caffeine. Bye.